Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, your moderator, and our little show that we have each Monday is looking at living at the now, which is the only time that is at our disposal, and also seeing everything that happens to us, good, bad, indifferent, as being a life lesson. And so I'm going to share the screen. Today we're talking about moving on down the road, not getting stuck in anything. And that there's always things that come up. So moving on down the road. After 40 years in the wilderness, Moses proclaimed, "We have been here long enough, that it's time to move on." So I'm wondering, what wilderness or what isolation have you been for far too long? How did you get stuck? And maybe why did you stay stuck? But more importantly, how can you get unstuck? And in thought, so I'm here to just share some thoughts and some insights as to how we can move on down. In the 12-step programs and working with those that are overcoming addictions and so forth, they have a saying that our sickness is in our secrets, and that the secrets that we share and become ashamed of and cannot share with others, then it just exacerbates itself and becomes worse and worse. So in wanting to free ourselves, we need to kind of sort through, pack up, and move on. Imagination, the more we think about things, well, first of all, we're storytellers. And many times we tell ourselves things that we add to from our imagination rather than from what was real. And then we make things being even worse than they were originally and bringing the guilt and the shame on us. And then sometimes we try to stuff it in the trunk. Good, bad, positive, negative, everything, just stick it in there and, out of sight, out of mind. Only it doesn't really work that way. Only the trunk is so heavy that it weighs down our behavior car, and where the back wheels are drawn to a crawl. And the front wheels can barely move. They're touching the ground. Those four wheels, are not always in order. Those back wheels are on the ground, but the front wheels are kind of reared up a little bit or not getting good traction to move forward. So we need to live in the moment, live in the now. And that can be the initial way of releasing and allowing healing to come. And what do we need to do? Well, maybe we need to look in the trunk at some of those tools and get out, begin to polish them, begin to get them, get the rust off by digging out the art supplies and making beautiful pictures, by sorting through the mysteries and writing lyrics and that shine and heal and bless. I was listening to a song the other day, and they said they had some lyrics in there that really shocked me. But you know what? It brought such a blessing. It was like, shut your brain up and listen to what's going on so that you really can live in the now. And by taking those forgotten seeds and planting them. Now, seeds that have been around for a long time, they may not grow as plentifully as fresh seeds. But there's a lot of things in there that still had a lot of truth to it that can be planted and can begin to grow. And then the weight begins, as we begin to use these tools and as we begin to expand and get busy, do something else, do something different, the weight begins to get a little lighter and we can move on down the road a little freer. It's always realizing that the past is the past, and that distance, sometimes we can, even though it is the past, a lot of times we hang on to it and drag it with us. And so that past can become a memory. It can become a millstone that you've hung around your neck. So beginning to realize that that past is the past and I can move past it. It'll always be there in the memory, but we can move past it and not make it a daily occurrence. It's not magic, but it can become like a miracle working in our life. To use the past to find your strength. What kept you going so that you can keep on keeping on with that? Well, how do we get stuck? Well, first of all, our emotions hold memories, and life experiences write things on the background of our mind, and they continue to add to. Our awareness leads us sometimes to say that everything is a-okay when it's not. And so we become stuck. We become, thinking this is who I am. And even the message that has a lot of good truth in it is often not heard because we're in an emotional battle. So why we stay stuck? Well, motion. There are three major characteristics under looking at the word motion. And one is to move, one is to act, and one is to give a signal, like maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down or whatever. And so those are for motions that we make. But then we have those emotions. And those emotions is when energy is added to the motion, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. But when energy is added to that motion, then the motion itself begins to change. So emotions can hinder progress of relating with yourself and relating to or relating with others. Those emotions, all of that energy behind the motion can hinder in relating with healing, can hinder in relating with being successful. So we're going to look at four emotions or four motions that separate us, and rarely do they work independently. So here we have some hindering emotions. Fear. First of all, fear stops us. Fear is, you just kind of freeze, and you listen to see, well, is what I'm hearing really real? Is it really real? But that fear of failure can be equated to a fear of success. I keep failing, and I'm afraid I'm going to fail again, but I keep failing because I'm afraid to succeed. So acknowledging that we are fearful, and even though we may open the door slowly and kind of look in there a little at a time, it's answering the door with faith. That it's having looked at your strengths and realizing that you have more than maybe you're giving yourself credit for. And then that little bit of faith, as we have a seed and we begin to plant it and it begins to grow, we can be looking forward to unknown possibilities. And then kind of going hand in hand with fear that stops you is anger that moves you. Anger is an emotion. It's a moving forward. It's a secondary emotion after fear. Once you're afraid and then you're angry at even being afraid, fear stops us, but anger propels us forward to either correct something, often in haste, and often in ineffective actions. Anger is rooted in hurts and in injustices. And sometimes, as we acknowledge the reality that you are a person of infinite worth and value, with gifts and talents, that you're the highest order on planet Earth, and to offer and give yourself room to grow, to trust your dreams, to trust your insights, to rely on your wisdom heart over your ego mind. Through kind, assertive behaviors, you can show yourself to be an individual of strength. And then a third emotion that goes so very much with staying stuck and getting stuck is guilt. And guilt burdens. It just begins to weigh heavier and heavier and heavier. Now, there's a big difference in a true guilt and a false guilt. A true guilt is the fact something has happened. It hurt you, it hurt someone else. Either way, whether it was thoughtless or whether it was deliberate, it's a reality. So look at it, acknowledge it. If you were the perpetrator, apologize for it. make needed restitutions, whether, either way, whether you were the perpetrator or whether you were the one that was offended or the one that was hurt. And this sets you free to move beyond that bullet, to move beyond what was so crushing so that you can heal. But then there is a false guilt. And that false guilt is not a fact, it's more of a feeling. It's a feeling that you haven't lived up to expectations. Maybe it was some unreal expectations you have of you being you. Maybe it was some expectations that others have imposed upon you, or that just in looking at other person that I want to be like that one, but I'm not able to be. And you just have this burden of guilt that I can't be. Well, it's accepting your humanity. Try to see what you can do, fail, learn from it, and try again. And then the fourth emotion that can be very, very hindering is resentment. And resentment has a tendency to constipate. It just to stop. Resentment, I define it as disappointment being taken to an extreme. Yeah, there's disappointments, but whenever we get resentful of whatever that disappointment was, it is quite damaging to relating with others. Resentment leads to feeling that things are pointless, and it actually teaches one to become helpless. Well, why should I even try? So it's accepting not only our humanity, but it's accepting the humanity of those that wounded us. Everyone in your life will disappoint you in one degree or another, but respond with grace and mercy. And in resentment, here's the sad thing about it, is in resentment, you lose your own identity because you become unsure of who you really are. So let's move on past this and begin to look at how we're going to get unstuck. Whenever we begin to work on ourselves, we have a viable project. And so awareness is always our key. It's being aware of right here, right now, in the present moment. To accept what our emotion is, the motion that's hurting, as well as the energy behind it. To accept it rather than deny it. To make it a deliberate decision to sit with it and let it work through, let it go through, let it not be something that's going to sit there and clog up or anger or keep things going worse. And a deliberate decision to let it move through. And it may take a little time. And then, getting unstuck, ask yourself some empowering questions. Ask yourself, what if I could let go of this? What if I could be more successful? What if it were possible? It's just that, it's that mystery of life. It's that living in the moment. It's that, what if I could? What if there is a possibility there? And it kind of takes the drag away. In getting unstuck, really contemplate and find out who you are, because possibilities are always bigger and they are more energizing than the problem itself. The possibilities. How can we dissect this? How can we take it apart? How can we render it not as effective as it has been in the hurt area? We are internally motivated. And as we really realize, there's inside things that are telling you to be hurt, to be sad, to be wounded. There are inside things that tells you whenever you're hungry, because we're internally motivated. And as we use that internal motivation, allow it to empower you to achieve goals rather than to waver when difficulties set in. And then always think and always live with could. I could instead of I should. Should leads us, it leads to dread beforehand. Oh, I should go to that. And it leads to regrets afterward. Oh, I didn't attend. So that invisible guilt then begins to hang over your head, over your heart. Whereas could, well, I could go, I could ask, I could call, I could this, I could that, brings you into the present moment. It's right here. And especially whenever you add ing to it, because it's right here, right now. And could is that unanswered question. What am I going to do? What could I do? And as we begin to think about it, I could, then the question becomes, but now will I? And it's looking at the fact that life is what it is. The situation is what it is, and accept it. And acceptance can be so, well, it's knowing as much what it is not as what it is. Acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance means the fact that what I can do or cannot do anything about. And acceptance of something is not resignation. Acceptance is the freedom to deal with it and the endeavor to change the situation, or to realize, well, it's not changeable. And it's a deal, but is it a deal breaker? And once we can begin to realize those things within ourselves, that so failure to accept what is to fight against what is. And it cuts off the creative system from finding some real solutions that can not only bring peace and can bring contentment. So it's also cultivating a willingness within our own wisdom heart to see the offender in a softer light, to begin to realize, well, you know, they are going through things that I can't even imagine. And one of those asking ourselves questions, empowering questions. And so it's, what if we are all seeking the same thing? I really believe we are. We are all seeking to love and to be loved. We are all seeking happiness. We are all seeking fulfillment, whether that's a full tummy or whether that is, we're all seeking safety and acceptance and shelter. We're all seeking the same thing. And regardless of the culture or the country or our curiosity or our personalities or our upbringing, I mean, regardless of all those things, all 8+ billion of us on planet Earth, we are more alike than we are different. I saw an Oprah quip on TV last night that was so powerful. And it was a whole group, about 25, 30 students that had their DNA tested. And then they were together and they looked to see where they were from and all the different countries, because they had, anyway, we're more alike than we are different, no matter what our background is. And when in community, we belong. So as we can see ourselves as part of a community and that we do belong. So then it's moving beyond. As our dreams and goals and growth are marvelous motivators. So I suggest that you create a little notebook and you have some different sections in there, and you can label them whatever you want them to be, but at least a section of what I appreciate, of some things I can celebrate, of what I am thankful for, of some positive interactions, of successes, and write something about that every day, and let that begin to be the things that you dwell on more than the hurts. And purposely dwell on these things that you're writing about. Personal development and peace are a work in progress. And it does, you know, whenever we're working on ourselves, it's a pretty viable project. So as we move on down the road does not mean leaving mate and family behind or quitting the job or just checking out. It means getting in touch with our authentic self so that we can learn to be the very best person possible that we are created to be. And in the process, as we take it more lightly instead of so heavily, the family and the situation, things will improve. And as you lovingly and humbly accept and believe in you and the gifts and the talents that you as a human being have been gifted with, you flow in positive influence of others. And so which would you rather have? A friend that's always right, or a friend that is there with a right relationship? Would you rather have someone that's always correct, or would you rather have someone that can connect with you and you can connect with? So what kind of a person are you? Are you connected with others? Are you always right? Or can you be relatable? Are you always correct? Or can you be connecting? And how that heals and brings life into being. So thank you very much for being here. I'm going to close out and wish you good mental health and many blessings.